we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. It is our weekend edition, and we certainly have a lot to talk about. Of course, we have the Iranian deal. There was an attempt to actually break cloture in the Senate. That was not successful, but just a few minutes ago, House of Representatives voted 269 to 162 actually voting against the Iran nuclear deal. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes with our good friend Gary Bauer, who will join us by phone. We also, of course, are in the midst of a presidential campaign, and so we'll be talking about that. A couple of comments yesterday that appeared in the rally, or actually 2 days ago, I should say, by Donald Trump, Ted Cruz. We're going to hear some of their comments. And then yesterday, Bobby Jindal spoke before the National Press Club about Donald Trump. So we'll get into the campaign, as well as many of these related issues, and especially some of these religious liberty issues. Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford are not with us today, but we have a great round table of guests. First of all, Kassie Dulin is the Legal Communications Director for the Liberty Institute, holds a Master of Arts degree in government from Regent University. He's been on the program with us many times before. So, Kassie, always great to have you.
Thanks so much, Kerby. It's great to be here with you.
Let me also introduce to the round table, Jonathan Bodnar is an entrepreneur consultant, has worked quite a bit in developing and growing ministries, one of the co-founders of a group which we'll talk about a little bit later, Unashamed Impact. And he joins us around the round table, really representing how millennials need to think about this issue. Jonathan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kerby. It's great to be here.
We're going to get into some of those issues. I might mention Matt Krause will also be with us shortly. He's involved in another activity. He's a Texas representative. I see him so often when they're looking for someone on television to represent a conservative point of view. So he'll join us as well. But Kassie, last week, many of our listeners saw that on Friday, Kelly was saying, I've got this big announcement to make. And we were all looking forward to it. After I finished the show, people actually contacted me saying, can you at least kind of tell me what that announcement was? But he was going to wait till Tuesday. Well, he didn't, because just a few minutes after it seemed like the show ended, he had to announce it because Military Times announced it. But we have waited a whole week not to say it, so you have the opportunity to educate our listeners. What's this big announcement Kelly was going to talk about?
Well, Kerby, I am so honored to get to make the announcement about Chaplain Wes Motter. He is a chaplain who has served honorably in the military he just had his 20-year anniversary on September 1st. He's been called the best of the best, served as a chaplain to Navy SEAL teams. But the Navy came and they came to Chaplain Motter and said, you were giving biblical advice and counseling sessions when sailors were asking you about things like marriage and homosexuality. And because of that, we're going to bring you before a board of inquiry and we're going to kick you. We have the possibility there to kick you out of the Navy. So when Chaplain Motter found out, he was absolutely devastated, came to us for help, and we've been going through a legal battle with the Navy, going back and forth and saying, this is not right. He has religious liberty to express his point of view, and he's a chaplain. It's his job to support a biblical point of view. So we've been going through this, and the awesome thing was, on Friday, we found out the Navy has cleared Chaplain Motter of all charges.
You know, one of the things Kelly and I said off the air is he was really surprised at this because he thought, maybe the best case scenario is they might reinstate him but put a letter in his file or something like this. But it seems like, and I right now have a link to, if you click on your picture, it takes you to libertyinstitute.org. It says victory. And this is a complete victory, is it not?
It is a complete and total victory. They actually say, I have a copy right here in my hands of the letter from the Department of the Navy. And they said, we're not even going to put this in his file on his official personnel record. What they did, they said what his commanding officer did of trying to make this happen, trying to prosecute him, was totally wrong. And it's true. We are delighted by the victory, but it caught even us a little bit by surprise. We had a meeting that morning, and Mike Berry, who's our attorney who directs our military affairs, had come in and said, we think we're going to hear something today, so we better prepare a press release. We think they're going to move forward with the Board of Inquiry. So I wrote up the press release, and we were finishing it up. And he came in, he said, Kassie, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have you change this. And I said, oh no, what happened? He said, we won. So it was a great day.
You know, this is the 14th anniversary of 9/11, so we're certainly going to be talking about that as well. But when we talk about the military, and certainly military is on our minds on a day like this, we think of these veterans memorials, and we've had sort of a partial victory in San Diego, which I wish was a complete one, but they kind of at least went along, and now you've got some other veterans memorials you're looking at. This is a victory for chaplains because it just is a height of political correctness or a lack of common sense when you say, we can't let chaplains talk about what the Bible has to say. You know, I don't know if I'm missing something, but I'm glad that at least common sense finally reigned in the Department of Navy, and they finally said he did nothing wrong by talking about what the Bible has to say about these issues.
Exactly. That's the job of a chaplain. It's to provide spiritual support and spiritual guidance. And he wasn't even just offering it. They came to him and asked, what is the biblical position on these issues? And his endorsing denomination is the Assemblies of God. They have standards and they have policies. And by military regulation, he has to uphold those or he could lose his license. So really the situation was just a little bit absurd with political correctness going completely amok. But we're really grateful that the Navy did the right thing. They realized chaplains have religious liberty and we need to let them do their jobs. And the last thing we should be doing is kicking them out of the Navy for doing their job.
You know, again, we are going to continue talking about these victories. Jonathan, in just a minute, I thought we might talk about some of these victories because here you got the chaplain. You have another one that we mentioned last week, and that is they were trying to close down and put all sorts of onerous regulations on these pregnancy resource centers. And not only did you win that, they sent you a pretty sizable check to cover all the legal costs. So again, that's another victory, is it not?
It is a complete victory. We received a check for $480,000 from the city of Austin. And really, I think that was important because it sends a message to the city and particularly the government that if you try and infringe on religious liberty, there will be a price to pay, as there should be, because the government should never be taking away Americans' freedoms that are protected by law. That's why we are a nation of law. The law protects us, and the government needs to fall in line or pay a price. You
know, Jonathan, I wanted to come to you because I know you speak a lot to millennials as one of those. And sometimes right now your generation says, oh, there's the political thing. We shouldn't get involved. Besides, we're losing all the cases. But here are a couple of victories. And this is why I think we need to encourage people of your age to get involved politically.
Yeah, I completely agree because I think like a lot of politics just kind of confuses the younger generation, and I think that this is important because it kind of hits home. And you know, we use youth pastors and parents and stuff to kind of direct us and everything. And when those those figures are kind of infringed on, and those figures are kind of being attacked, that hits home a lot.
Yeah, I think so. So again, we're dealing with some very successful and very unique victories. But again, if you'd like to know a little bit more, one of the things we always like to do in the first segment on our weekend edition is religious liberty. And so again, you can go to libertyinstitute.org or just click on the picture of Kassie. That will take you there and find out a little bit more. But for those of you in the military, we salute you today. And especially those of you that are chaplains, this is an incredible victory, and it's been hard for me, and I've had to have some patience to wait an entire week to announce what Kelly could have announced last week, but we waited to give you that opportunity. We come back, we are going to be talking with Gary Bauer. This vote on the Iranian nuclear deal, a very big issue, and you will have a chance to hear from Gary Bauer, who also spoke at the rally. We're going to play some of the clips from what Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and others said at the rally, and of course, figure out what is the next step in terms of this. A vote today in the House, 269 to 162, but what about that United States Senate? Lots of issues to address. We'll do that right after these messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Are you ready to boycott Oreo cookies? Columnists like Marilyn Katz and presidential candidates like Donald Trump said they're ready to stop eating Oreos because Nabisco's parent company shut down its Chicago plant and decided to lay off 600 workers. Meanwhile, they're ramping up Oreo-making operations in Mexico. You know, Oreos are an all-American sandwich cookie that was invented by the National Biscuit Company in 1912. We all enjoy the indulgence of dunking them in cold milk, but shipping 600 jobs to Mexico was enough for some people, and they plan to boycott Oreos. While people want to blame Nabisco's parent company for the move, they should look at government policies. A major ingredient in Oreos is sugar, but the U.S. sugar program creates this job-killing action. Americans pay twice the average world price for sugar. Thus, industries that use sugar have a big incentive to relocate from the United States to other countries. Oreos are also manufactured in a number of other states like New Jersey, Oregon, and Virginia. But how long will it be before some of those cookie factories move due to the protectionist trade practices? Oreos are not just an American cookie, but Oreos are a global brand that probably should be produced in other countries. There is, of course, another reason. Oreos in Mexico are now produced by the biggest cookie factory in the world. Frankly, it was cheaper to move jobs to that plant than to refurbish a plant in Chicago and pay unionized workers. And let's not forget that the United States has the highest corporate income tax in the world. You know, we may lament the loss of jobs from America to other countries, but we don't have to look any further than government taxes, regulations, and policies that are to blame. That's how the cookie crumbles. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Giving Films, 90 Minutes in Heaven, based on a true story, in theaters now, rated PG-13. More information at 90minutesinheaventhemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the House of Representatives did vote against the Iranian nuclear deal, 269 to 162. No real surprise there. Sad reality is they did not get the requisite number of 60 votes in the United States Senate. So we thought we'd go back to our good friend Gary Bauer, who has really been on the forefront of these issues. And Gary, thanks for joining us once again.
Well, thank you, Kerby. Great to be with you.
I watched your speech at the rally the other day, and you talked about the fact that when President Obama returned from Martha's Vineyard, he said, you know, I got to get back and deal with the crazies who oppose this Iran deal. And you went through a very long list of, you know, is it crazy to actually give $100 billion to a state sponsor of terrorism? Is it crazy to negotiate with a regime that denies the Holocaust and is planning for a second one? It was a great speech, but it's an illustration again about apparently at least 162 members of the House of Representatives said, no, it's not crazy. We're going to vote to support the president.
Yeah, I tell you, Kerby, it's a sad week, I think, for the country. Obviously I hate losing ever on any issue here in Washington, but every once in a while, you know, most of these debates we have, quite frankly, over the exact amount of money that's going to be spent on one program or another, within a few weeks, those battles are generally forgotten. But every once in a while, a great nation has to deal with a great issue. And usually it involves war and peace, freedom and slavery, life and death. And this is one of those issues. We lost the vote because of the maneuvering that was done to change the process that was used to judge this treaty. And second of all, the loss that took place, even though the public at the end of it was overwhelmingly against the deal, the loss that's taken place will clearly make the world a more dangerous place, make it more dangerous for America, for Israel and our allies. And I think there's every reason to believe that the next president will not only have to deal now with a nuclear-armed North Korea, which we already are dealing with, but with a nuclear-armed Iranian regime run by extremist mullahs who believe that the end of the world is coming soon and that they need to hasten that day by fighting the infidel, killing the infidel, and wiping Israel off the face of the earth.
You know, one of the things we have in Around a Roundtable today, we have Kassie Dulin as well as Jonathan Bodnar a little bit later. Matt Krause will be joining us. And let's be honest, Gary, we're old enough, we could almost be their parents, okay? So we're talking about youngsters around here, but I thought it might be good for a little bit for whether you're old or young, but especially for some that are young. Why would I care about this nuclear arms deal? And I'm kind of a simple man, so, let me try something out on you. If I went to buy a car, or lease a car, and just before I sign the contract, I notice that there are two side deals, and I say, and these are affecting my contract, yes? Okay, can I see them? No, you can't. Would I sign that, and is that at all analogous to what we have right now with this nuclear arms deal?
It's exactly what we have. One of the requirements of the legislation in Congress that set up the review process was that anything in the deal, any side deals, any ancillary documents, anything that was pertinent to the issue before the Congress and before the American people had to be sent to the Congress by a certain date so that our elected officials could review what was in those deals and the side agreements. How else can you make a legitimate judgment about something if you don't have a chance to do that? The president did not send all the additional material. He refused to give the details of several side deals. So to this day, according to members of Congress themselves, many people voted not really knowing what they were voting on. Now, I'll tell you this, Kerby, if there was anything in the side deals that would have helped President Obama get the vote, we would have heard about that.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So one can only assume that what's in the side deals are even more disturbing than the things that we already know about the deal.
It reminds me just a little bit of when Obamacare was being passed. We have to pass it so we can read it to know what's in it.
Yeah, and as we know, the Obamacare bill, the Obamacare law, has been the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, every time we turn around, there's some other lump of coal in our stocking as a result of Obamacare. And some of it, doesn't affect all of us. Some of it we can maneuver around. But allowing a regime that believes what the radical Islamic government of Iran believes to get nuclear weapons is something that we can't maneuver around. It raises the very real possibility of a nuclear arms race throughout the Middle East, already the most volatile part of the world. The Ayatollah Khomeini just promised 2 days ago again that in a very short period of time, a couple of decades, there would be no Israel. Mm-hmm. And these are the people that we're dealing with, unfortunately.
Let's talk about that. Here's another illustration. If I go and buy something in a store, and after a while I begin to realize that the owner of the store hates Jewish people and it means them harm, and I get the sense that some of my money might even be used to have anti-Semitic rallies and the rest, I think I'd stop going to that store. What about this $100 billion that goes to Iran? Does that end up in the hands of terrorists?
Well, that's a great point, Kerby. I heard Senator Mitch McConnell, and Senator Corker from Tennessee say in the last day, well, sure, we lost, but we really exposed the flaws, and basically the next president will take care of this. Well, by the time the next president comes in, Iran will have received at least $100 billion. That's an extraordinary amount of money. We know what's going to happen with it. In fact, since the president negotiated the deal, Iranian generals ran off to Moscow and Beijing, signed big arms deals with those two enemies of the United States. and Hezbollah and Hamas, two terrorist proxies that Iran works with, have publicly said they can't wait to get their cut of the loot. So this is just, it's hard to find words to accurately and describe exactly what has happened here, but it's something to the great detriment of both the Israeli people and the American people. And I hope, it's something I promised the other day at that speech, I hope, if nothing else, we'll be able to defeat some of the members of Congress that voted for this thing.
We do have the numbers and the names of those individuals that voted, so we'll certainly get into that. Gary, just before we go, I know later on in the program we're going to talk about Kim Davis, and I know you have some comments about that as well. So just before I let you go, any thoughts about what has been transpiring in your home state of Kentucky?
Well, certainly glad and gratified to see her out of jail. I'm disturbed that the knee-jerk reaction of so many people is, no, she has to be forced as a county clerk to issue these marriage licenses. That's not what religious liberty has generally meant over the years. She was elected, ran as a Democrat, as a matter of fact, was elected to that position, and when she was elected, the law of the land was that marriage was between a man and a woman. There's been no law passed since, either by Kentucky or the United States Congress, that changes that definition. All we've had is a Supreme Court decision that pretends to change the definition of marriage, but the Supreme Court has been wrong many times before. So if someone thinks that she should be forced to issue these so-called marriage licenses, then I would ask them, when the Supreme Court ruled that slavery was okay, should office holders then, should they have been forced to uphold the right of somebody to own a slave? I think there's some times when the government is so wrong that acts of resistance or civil disobedience are the only alternatives.
Well, again, Gary Bauer served, of course, as Chief Domestic Policy Advisor under Ronald Reagan, of course, as the President of American Values. And again, if you'd like to know more about this wonderful organization that he's a part of, they have an end-of-day report, which we always promote. And, of course, you can click on the picture of Gary Bauer. That will take you to American Values and find out more about the good work they're doing. So I appreciate you being so bold and speaking out there at the rally. Thank you for your courageous stand on all these issues over the years, and thank you for giving us a little bit of time today here on Point of View.
Always great to be with you, Kerby, and keep up your great job for our country.
We are looking forward to the next time with Gary Bauer. Let's take a break, and then we will get the roundtable conversation. Matt Krause is joining us now, state representative in the state of Texas, also another graduate of Patriot Academy. I'm sitting across another graduate, right, Kassie? So we'll talk about that in case people are not familiar. Jonathan Bodnar with me as well. And we are going to come back and hear a little bit about what Donald Trump said at that rally, what Ted Cruz said about that rally, and then get some other comments about that and many other issues that we need to address. If you'd like to know more about any of our guests, if you'd like to find some of the articles that we've posted today, or even like to go to some of the video clips that we've made available, it's all available at the website pointofview.net. Let's take a break. When we come back on our weekend edition, we'll get a roundtable discussion and put a few more issues on the table. There's lots to talk about. We'll be back right after this.
Please remember September, the month that your gift to Point of View will be doubled. Give $25, it becomes $50. Give $50, it becomes $100. One of the ministry's very special friends wants to motivate you to give, especially if you've never given before. No gift is too little nor too big. Please give generously. Help us equip believers to represent Jesus Christ in this very important and critical hour. Call now and give 1-800-347-5151 or online at pointofview.net. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net.
From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room. Tony and Elizabeth Jordan's marriage is turning into a battle, and their daughter is caught in the crossfire until Elizabeth meets Miss Clara.
This is my favorite place in this house. I call it my war room.
And learns that prayer is a powerful weapon. War Room. Now playing. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at warroomthemovie.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. At the moment, talking about the nuclear arms deal, and you will be receiving from me shortly an email that is going out just about now talking about the vote that took place in the House, 269 to 162, but that's just one of 3 resolutions. There's another one that would actually rebuke President Obama for failing to submit these side deals that we talked about, and another one that would actually require U.S. sanctions to stay in place. So this is not the end of these votes, and this is an opportunity for you to contact your 2 senators and representatives. So again, this will be posted on our website, pointofview.net. If you receive an email from me, it is something I would encourage you to read through. And if you know your senators and your representative, fine, but we've made it very easy that if you click on that button and you know your address, that's all you need to know. It will pop up your 2 senators and your representative. And a little bit later, we'll even let you know how they voted as we begin to collect those votes. But you can then tell them that they need to continue to vote on these issues because there are actually 2 other resolutions that can be voted on. And so there's a lot to cover here today. But we're also joined by Matt Krause. He is a Texas State representative, and he has been somebody that we've interviewed a number of times before. I noticed recently Empower Texans gave you an A-plus rating. I never got an A-plus in school, so I'm glad you got an A-plus. And he is also, of course, had a great legal background, and another person from Patriot Academy. Cassie and you both have been involved over the years in one way or another with Patriot Academy.
That's right. Yeah, it's a great organization training the next generation of leaders like Governor Dulin during her time there.
She served as Texas governor on the Patriot Academy.
That's exactly right. So thanks for having me. It's an honor to be back with y'all.
Yesterday, you were introducing first Ted Cruz's wife and then Ted Cruz. So he was just coming back from one of these votes, wasn't he?
That's exactly right. He was supposed to be there earlier in the evening, but since Mr. McConnell had them stay late to take some Iran votes, he came in late. So we had the chance to hear from Heidi Cruz, who did a fantastic job laying out her husband's agenda and what he wants to do. So it was a great chance to hear from her. I told everybody in the audience, I said, if you want to hear Ted speak, just turn on the news or YouTube, but this is a special privilege getting to hear from his wife. So it was a great evening.
A very talented power couple, I put it mildly. So that's the case. Cassie, you had some comments as well as we talk about this idea of the nuclear arms deal.
I think that a lot of people are asking, okay, why should I care about this deal? Shouldn't I just trust the president? But I think there are 2 really main issues why we should care. The first being security, and the second just being justice. And as far as security goes, it's really interesting. I'm actually on the U.S. Department of State website right now. And if you look at state sponsors of terrorism, they have a list there. There are only 3 countries on it, and one of them is Iran.
Yes. And
through this deal, we're going to be giving them an extra billions of dollars that they can use against our allies and against us. So as just an issue of security, it's very important, a reason we should care. But I think another reason is justice. I mean, if you go to Human Rights Watch, their website, you can look up and see the abuses against human rights that this country has done. I mean, in 2014, they had the 2nd highest number of executions in the world after China. They executed the largest number of juvenile offenders, and they're one of the biggest jailers in the world of journalists, bloggers, and social media activists. And so if we want to just look at it from security and justice, that just those 2 reasons alone, I think, are enough to want to oppose this deal.
Jonathan, I asked you a couple minutes ago about some of the fellow millennials. I know you speak on this sometimes and trying to get everybody excited about this. I think they probably heard enough from Gary Bauer, but again, this is just something that we need to educate the next generation about, the possible danger this could be for the world that they're going to inherit.
I agree, Kerby. I think this affects not only our future, but like our kids' futures and everything. And as a millennial generation, we don't always think about like the future of our children and our friends and everything. But I think what's crazy about this, kind of what Cassie said, as a security issue, we're paying for one of the biggest security threats, in our generation that has been presented. And I think the biggest problem, I think the reason that the deal the American people have kind of like noticed the decline in this deal is, we've went from 33% support in America for it to, I believe almost 20% at this point. And the big question is, we don't even know what's in it, and so I think the biggest effect is just on our future as a generation.
Yes, as I said, if I were to buy a car or lease a car and there were some side deals and I wasn't allowed to look at that, I'm not sure I'd buy the car. And
exactly.
This one's a lot more significant than that.
Well, and I think if you bought a car from a car dealer who said death to the car owner, you probably wouldn't buy that car in the first place. And I think that's another thing that
kind
should
of
give
my
us
illustration.
pause.
If I went to a place where it was anti-Semitic, I realized it was going to be using that to fund it something else. So they're just some great illustrations that we can use. But let's go to that rally because, as I mentioned, Gary Bauer spoke at that, but also Donald Trump. And wherever Donald Trump goes, he draws some cameras. And here's one thing he had to say.
I've been doing deals for a long time. I've been making lots of wonderful deals, great deals. That's what I do. Never, ever, ever in my life have I seen any transaction so incompetently negotiated as our deal with Iran.
This is one of those times we want to say, Donald, really tell me what you're thinking. But again, he's a deal maker, whether you agree with his superlatives about the deals that he creates or not. It's certainly illustrated again that if we wanted to come up with a deal, I'm not sure this is one I want to go with. What do you think?
I think that it's been universally panned by almost everybody. And I don't know what Secretary of State Kerry did in those negotiation meetings other than said, okay, that sounds good, because it doesn't seem like there's any give and take. I can't find one area where America comes out better or got what they wanted other than what Iran was asking for. And so I think Donald Trump is right there. It's terrible.
We had Alan Dershowitz on recently, and he's from Harvard Law School, who, by the way, said the most intelligent and brightest student he ever had was Ted Cruz, which is another story. But he says, I voted for Barack Obama both times. I met with Barack Obama. He says now I'm probably going to vote for Hillary Clinton. So obviously he's a little different than some of the people sitting around the table. But he said this is a terrible deal, and I've been doing all I can to end that. And he's spoken at some of these rallies too. Well, you got to at least have one more Donald Trump clip. So let's hear another thing that Donald Trump said at the rally.
If I win the presidency, I guarantee you that those 4 prisoners are back in our country before I ever take office. I guarantee that.
So again, the prisoners, that's an issue, isn't it, as well? We've got individuals that we in the religious liberty community have been looking at and human rights community have been looking at and praying for some time.
Absolutely. Pastor Saeed is a great example of that. Wonderful man, and he's in prison basically just because of his faith. And that was really just one of the most upsetting things to me about this deal. I mean, the Daily Signal outlines there are so many things that the Obama administration just buckled on. I mean, we are one of the greatest, strongest nations in the world, and we were like little girls at the table. Oh, you want that? Okay. And that being one of them, we didn't secure the release of political prisoners and prisoners because of their faith. We didn't get the verification requirements. We didn't get the access to the key nuclear sites. We didn't get access to their scientists and documents. And just allowing these human rights abuses to continue. I tend to agree. I think I might have rather trusted Donald Trump to negotiate this one.
The list goes on and on. And guys, isn't it good that the girl said they were like girls?
That's right. I did it.
She could say that. I couldn't. Jonathan.
I think the only person that has a bigger ego than Donald Trump is President Obama right now, because I think for him it's all about legacy. And I think because it's about legacy, that's why everything got compromised. That's why, none of this was in the deal that should have been in the deal. And that's why it's such a terrible deal.
Well, let's one more time go to the rally. This will be the last time for those rally clips, but I thought you'd like to at least hear what Ted Cruz had to say. This is a fairly lengthy one in which he explains some of his concerns.
There is no greater threat to the safety and security of America. There is no greater threat to the safety and security of Israel than a nuclear Iran. I agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu that a nuclear Iran poses an existential threat to the nation of Israel. And let me be clear, when he says existential, he doesn't mean a bunch of Frenchmen in black berets chain smoking.
A good little line there, which probably went over the head of about half of the audience, but nevertheless. So any final comments before we take a break about this nuclear deal, because we're going to move on to some.
Anytime you're negotiating with people who have sworn to kill you or want to kill you or kill a nation that is one of your closest allies and friends in a region that you don't have many of those, I don't know why we're bargaining with them in the first place, and let alone giving them everything they're asking for. I think it is a legacy issue. One of Obama's administration officials yesterday said, this is our health care for the second term.
Yeah, and I think that my dad was a business guy, and he did a lot of negotiation. And what he always taught me is your greatest strength in negotiation is the ability to walk away. And I think Jonathan really hit it on the head. I think President Obama was not going to walk away from this deal because it was about his legacy, and that led him to just give up way more than we ever should have even considered.
Some of the clips we played from Benjamin Netanyahu when he spoke at Congress were all about that. It's possible to walk away. So if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We put the nuclear arms deal on the table, and we have a take action item that you can find on our website, and also an email that is going out just about now. When we come back, we have a lot more to talk about. We have Kim Davis, who is in jail. Could this have been avoided? I want to look at some of our religious liberty people here, and a good piece that came by Ryan Anderson's been on the program with us. And, of course, we have Planned Parenthood, and we also have some comments that Bobby Jindal said about Donald Trump. So we're going to play some of those. Maybe that'll get into the second hour. We have a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after these important messages.
A new chapter in the battle between the state and religious liberty has begun. Ground zero became a Rowan County, Kentucky jail. County Clerk Kim Davis is not in any way seeking to stop same-sex marriages in her county. She simply doesn't want to issue those licenses. To do so would make her a participant in that which her faith teaches violates God's law. She's fine with recording any legal marriage license. She just doesn't want her name affixed to it. Marriage licenses are permanent records and remain in county records permanently. The judge could have ordered the state of Kentucky to change the licenses. Instead, he ordered Kim to jail. Michael Keegan of the far-left People for the American Way made this reasonable-sounding statement. Elected officials who feel they can't in good conscience fulfill their duties have an honorable way to proceed. They can find another line of work. We're hearing this sentiment from some presidential candidates. Carly Fiorina would protect your right of conscience, but not if you work for the government. She said in an interview, "I think when you're a government employee, you're put in a different position, honestly." Some would say to Kim, resign. Will we ask that of every person across the nation who inconveniences a gay couple by refusing to participate in what they sincerely believe is sin? If you're faithful to natural and biblical law, are you now excluded from working for the government? Same-sex marriage is being used as a weapon against religious liberty. Kim Davis is refusing to acquiesce. She tried another way. Before the Supreme Court handed down its decision in Obergefell v. Hodges in June, she was one of 57 clerks who wrote to the Kentucky legislature, then in session, asking lawmakers to, quote, get a bill on the floor to help protect clerks with religious objections to authorizing marriage licenses for same-sex couples. The Heritage Foundation suggests ways the state of Kentucky could handle this. Change the form, not the beliefs. Modify Kentucky marriage licenses so the county clerk's name does not necessarily appear, instead using the name of the deputy clerk who processes the license. Allow an opt-out, North Carolina does. Clerks who object can decline to be involved in issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, while the state guarantees it will find someone else to perform the function. Or implement an online registration system for marriages. Hawaii has such a system. The White House insists no public official is above the rule of law. There's a double standard here. Attorney General Eric Holder refused to abide by, uphold, enforce, or defend the nation's law defining marriage as it has been for millennia. And when certain mayors, the most prominent being San Francisco's Gavin Newsom, defied state law and issued marriage licenses to same-sex couples, no one discussed imprisoning them. At this crucial moment, we need lots of Kim Davises. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Kassie Dulin with us, Jonathan Bodnar, Matt Krause, and we will take some of your phone calls. Some of you may want to talk about the nuclear arms deal, so we'll get to those calls in just a minute. But I also want to put Kim Davis on the table here because this conversation has been played out. First, we have posted a good article that I think you might want to read, and it's "We Don't Need Kim Davis to Be in Jail." It's written by Ryan Anderson, who's been on the program with us a number of times before. Of course, his book on marriage, and then the more recent book on Truth Overruled. And he is with the Heritage Foundation and certainly have followed his career for some time. And he points out that there might have been some ways to have accommodated her situation. And those of you that listen in the state of North Carolina are well aware of the fact that the North Carolina legislature indeed did something like this. But let me go around the round table for just a minute. Matt, for years we've always been told that, if we have same-sex marriage, there won't be any problem. Nobody's going to get thrown in jail. Well, she did.
Right. And unfortunately, I don't think we've listened to the rhetoric and what people have been saying on the other side for long enough, because for time and again, they've said this is a zero-sum game. Religious liberty and our movement cannot coexist together. And so I'm not surprised by it at all, but I think the general population, in some ways, this might have been what it took to open their eyes to see, okay, we do need to protect religious liberties. It is at stake, and what are we going to do about it? Because I think you ask the majority of Americans, they don't want to live in a society where somebody who stands up for their religious beliefs goes to jail.
I just spoke at a chapel just a few hours ago at a seminary, and when I did that, one of the questions from the audience was about this issue of Kim Davis, and said, a lot of Christians are kind of divided. And I said, well, on the one hand, what you may not know, and let's use the book of Daniel for just a minute, they attempted to have what I might call a Daniel 1 resolution. Remember, Daniel said, well, I can't eat meat sacrificed to idols, but can we have a separate diet? And that was allowed. And so that conflict between the government and faith was resolved. And she tried to resolve that because the Kentucky legislature could have provided religious liberty protections just as North Carolina. There also was a possibility that since they were going to reprint the marriage licenses anyway from husband and wife to partner 1, partner 2, they could take her name off of it. So she tried the Daniel 1, didn't work, so then we're in the other parts of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Daniel in the lion's den. So it's helpful to understand some of the backstory, but at the same time, this, I'm afraid, is going to play out in a lot more places than just Rowan County, Kentucky. Kassie, what do you think?
I completely agree. And to me, this is one of the biggest dangers that happens when you have the kind of judicial activism that we saw. There have been other states just like the North Carolina bill. The North Carolina legislature passed the bill saying, okay, if you're a magistrate, you can recuse yourself from issuing marriage licenses. You still have to let your office do it, but you don't have to be a part of it. And if we had gone on a state-by-state process of dealing with the marriage issue, I think we could have avoided a lot of this, and Kim Davis wouldn't have had to go to jail, nor should anyone ever. I think we should all be able to agree no one should be able to go to jail just because their beliefs. But I think really some of the biggest victims in this, obviously Kim Davis was one, but she kind of came out a victor. She did get freed, and that was the good thing. But to me, what's one of the most tragic things is other people who are going to be scared to stand up for their beliefs now because they realize there is a price to pay. She did spend 5 nights in jail, and that's going to be a part of her record for the rest of her life. One of her deputies in the county clerk's office, her name is Melissa Thompson, she is issuing the marriage license now. And this is what she told the New York Times. She said, I don't really want to, but I will follow the law. I'm a preacher's daughter, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
There we go. Jonathan, I'm just thinking, again, younger you are, the more likely you are to accept homosexuality. But again, I would say to the millennial group that says, well, we should be tolerant, we should say, well, okay, if you want to get married, fine, but you shouldn't force me to participate in that wedding, and you shouldn't force me to have my name on that if I disagree with it. Is that a fair way to look at this?
Yeah, I think we live in a generation that, like, we love social issues. So this really does bring the issue of religious freedom home for us. Is your faith really worthy to, stand up for? Obviously, the government thinks that they can give you, freedoms that God doesn't allow us to have. But should the government be big enough to also take away those rights? Or, does that violate the Constitution? And so I think, I definitely think we live in a generation that kind of hits home.
What about the legal implications? I got Matt here, and he certainly worked in this area for many years. Kelly Shackelford has said this, I've said this, and then yesterday, Tony Perkins said this. So if 3 of us agree, maybe you'll agree with us as well, that this doesn't stop here, because you're going to perhaps have professional statements and requirements for individuals that are doctors, nurses, public school teachers, and others to accept sexual orientation. if this plays out in the negative way it's playing out right now, you could eventually say that it would be impossible to be a Christian county clerk, a Christian physician, a Christian nurse, a Christian public school teacher. Am I right?
Well, after listing those three names who supported it, it'd be hard for me to disagree with that at this point. But no, I agree. No, absolutely. And you know, the crazy thing is employment accommodations are nothing new. I mean, we've seen this time and time again, year after year after year in different circumstances. So this Kim Davis situation shouldn't have been any different. It should have been an employment accommodation for her sincerely held religious beliefs. But since we didn't do that, since we are seeing the zero-sum game play out, I agree. It's not going to lessen. It's only going to escalate. And unfortunately, because everybody laughed just a couple of years ago, oh, you're not going to get jailed for your faith in America. Well, now that has happened. So for those who are scoffing or laughing at what the scenario you just put out, okay, are you going to be laughing in a couple of months or a couple of years now?
We'll have to see. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. What do you think should have happened to Kim Davis? Should she have been sent to jail? And what should be the accommodation, if anything, that the state of Kentucky should provide? Or should they make accommodations? Love to get your comments. 1-800-351-1212. We'll take some phone calls. First in South Carolina, WLPE. Jack, thank you for calling today.
Yes, sir. I actually have a comment and a leftover question from the last segment.
That would be great.
So one thing that has been mentioned here and there, I guess, is that President Obama's father was a Muslim. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but it sure seems almost as if we have a sleeper cell in the White House. That's just a comment. My question is, what prevents the Iranians from buying, and never mind them building their own, but what prevents them from buying a nuclear weapon from the Russians or the Pakistanis or maybe even North Korea? I mean, it seems as if there's not there's nobody in our government that's going to be preventing them from doing much of anything. It seems like that's a real possibility. I mean, they could have one tomorrow, it seems.
Sure. The quick answer is that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement does theoretically bar that, but the reality is there was a while back, and we reported on this program, where there was a ship coming from North Korea to Iran, and the government actually interdicted that and prevented that from landing. So there is, I think it'd be fair to say right now, there are all sorts of countries that do not want Iran to get the nuclear weapon, and those are countries that are like Saudi Arabia and others. And I think Russia probably doesn't want to give it to them either, because it destabilizes the region. So it is at least theoretically possible that we could still prevent them from buying one and obtaining one, but it is much more difficult if they have the technology to prevent them from producing one. So that's the quick answer. But we see a number of you want to ask some questions or make some comments, but I'm coming up to our break, so let's encourage you to just wait on the line. We'll get to those phone calls in just a minute, and let me encourage you to visit our website, pointofview.net. You can find out more about each one of our guests. You can also find some of the articles that we have mentioned today, one on the nuclear arms deal, one on Kim Davis, and one on Donald Trump and Ben Carson. So all those are available on the website. Also a link to Liberty Institute, some of those great victories we talked about just a minute ago. But we need to take a break. Those of you online, stay tuned. We'll get to your phone calls right after this.
From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room. Tony and Elizabeth Jordan's marriage is turning into a battle, and their daughter is caught in the crossfire until Elizabeth meets Miss Clara.
This is my favorite place in this house. I call it my war room.
And learns that prayer is a powerful weapon. War Room. Now playing. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at warroomthemovie.com.
As you fight in your war room, please include Kerby and Point of View in your prayers. We have a very important opportunity right now. A wonderful friend has said that he will match every gift in September up to a total of $50,000. Point of View needs that support to keep equipping you for your life inside and outside your war room, both as you pray and as you live. So please call now and give generously. 1-800-347-5151 or online at pointofview.net. That's 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kirby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Mentioned that I was speaking earlier at a seminary doing chapel, and I said, you know, this particular day is target rich, if you will. It's the 14th year after 9/11, so of course I spent some time talking about 9/11 and ISIS and those kinds of things. And then, of course, 14 years, that'd be what, 2 Shemitahs. So you have Jonathan Cahn with the Shemitahs, the mystery of the Shemitah, and then the Harbingers since 9/11. So you got all of that. Of course, and those are coming up this weekend and the next. And then, of course, you got the 4th blood moon, which is the 28th. So there are a lot of other things to talk about in addition to the ones we put on the table so far. And those have been, of course, the Iran nuclear deal. Kim Davis, we're going to talk about the campaign, because another target-rich environment is the fact that next Wednesday is the second Republican debate, the second of 9, and then there's, of course, going to be the first of 6, which will take place next month. So if you don't think we have some things to talk about, we'll try to fit them all in this second hour as quickly as we can. Let's take some phone calls. One of the questions, of course, was about the Iranian deal, so we'll go to Rick in Rick in Missouri. Excuse me. I wanted to get you on the air. What would you like to share?
Well, I would like to know why our president would negotiate a deal that guarantees America will be attacked with a nuclear weapon. And that absolutely will happen.
Sooner or later, if not a direct bomb dropping on our shores. The other possibility, which we've talked about with Frank Gaffney, of exploding a nuclear weapon in the upper atmosphere and getting an electromagnetic pulse. And then we don't have a power grid. So
that's right. And secondly, why would our elected officials stand up to affirm this agreement? Well, that money fountain that was open, that $150 billion that went to Iran, that fountain must still be flowing for those votes to come in. I'm sorry, but there's treason in the air somewhere here.
Yeah. And again, a lot of people wonder if you can explain some of these votes, Matt, and you've looked at the Texas legislature, but you've also looked at the Congress as well, about whether there's blackmail, maybe, but I think more likely, I just wonder if there's some money flowing around here. You look at some of the individuals who voted with the president, it looks like if you try to follow the money, that maybe some of them have benefited from money from the Middle East.
Yeah, well, and I think it's incredible that they are touting a victory as getting 1/3 of one body to say we're okay with this,
yes.
Right? I mean, that means that there's a lot of other people in his own party that they cannot convince. And so I'm sure their money is flowing. I'm sure there are deals being made. I'm sure pressure's being put on by the White House. But at the end of the day, if they can only get 34 votes out of the Democratic caucus for this deal, that should tell you something right there.
That sure tells you a lot. So, very good question. Some of the other calls on Kim Davis. So let's take one of those phone calls. We'll head to North Carolina this time on the Good News Network. Nancy, what would you like to add?
Hi. I just want to let you know I love your show. I know it has to be tough sometimes, some of the topics that you take on, but thank God there are people like yourself willing to do it. So I just want to thank you for that. I would like to say I'm from Kentucky originally. I live in North Carolina because I was married to a Marine, and so we're, of course, proud of that here in Jacksonville.
Yes.
But what I'd like to say is I think it's wrong right now in our country when, as Christians, we're not able to express our views, or we have to take an issue like the gay marriage and not be able to say we love people, but we don't have to, take a stand and do what we feel and we know is wrong for us to do. And, I have a son that has a disability. And, of course, he has, rights as having a disability, when it comes to jobs and things like that. But anytime there's any discrimination, regardless of what it is, then something needs to be done. And I think they do owe her an apology or something because, do and not have any feelings about it, even though it's a strong feeling that we have as Christians because we know it's wrong. We know how it will hurt our society and our culture, and yet they want you to say, well, that's your feeling, and yet we can prove just by going into God's Word what He says that marriage is between a man and a woman. It didn't say a man and a woman and a woman. It says a man and a woman, and that's God's Word. And they can't change that. No matter how much they try, they can't do it.
Yes. You raised a good question. Kassie, I want to come to you for just a minute because we're hearing more and more of individuals that are running for Congress and even for the presidency saying, well, you have the freedom of worship. Well, that's not the same thing as freedom of religion, is it?
No, it's really not. Some candidates are saying you have the right to do what you want inside your church or inside the four walls of your home, but your liberty stops when you walk out your front door or walk out the door to your church. And I really think it does go back to the Constitution, but I think we need to even go a little further back to that. In the Declaration of Independence, it talks about we have certain unalienable rights, and they're not given to us by government. They're given to us by our Creator. And I think a lot of people wonder, well, why should I care about religious liberty, especially if I'm not religious? And the thing is, governments that can take away your religious liberty, they can take away your freedom to not only believe, but to act on your belief and speak about that belief, can take away your freedom of speech. They can take away your freedom of association. They can take away so many rights that aren't, even though they're not given to us by government, they're rights that are given to us by God. And that's the real danger that I see as we move forward.
Yeah, again, we've talked about that because a government that's big enough to give you rights can take those away. And again, if you understand that your rights are given to you by government, then, of course, they can take those away as well. So let's take another phone call real quickly before we take a break, and we'll go to Jim in the state of Texas, and we'll get back to this issue of the Iran nuclear deal. Jim, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I'm sure that it's about the first time I've heard your show. I'm in Corpus, and I was listening, and I know you probably have had all kinds of guests, and I really enjoy some of your comments and your guest comments. I practiced law for over 30 years. I do a lot of work for Muslims. And I don't know if you know this, but presently there's actually a land negotiation going on right now to build the biggest mosque in America in Texas. That's a different issue. But do you know the folks that I've talked to, and they've, over the years, they've grown comfortable with me, though I am not a Muslim. They have shared with me that their point of view, the reason that this took place today, is it's the anniversary date of 9/11, and of course in New York. But it was an anniversary because they're looking at it as a subjection, not a surrender, but a subjection of what they call dimony. I'm sure you must have heard that and discussed that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, yes.
Okay, they use the word dimony. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what they're talking about. And it's fascinating, and they said it was very important for that date. And I said, well, why is that? And they explained to me, and you may know this, that on 9/10 was the date that the Muslims were defeated by Spain, France, and driven out of Vienna. And so they reviewed this at 9/11. And you've discussed all that kind of thing, have you?
We have, but you brought it up again, and I think we're going to have to go to a break, but I'll go back and explain that a little bit more because I think it's important. It's also interesting that ISIS last year, al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, picked July 4th, 2014, to go into the mosque in Mosul, which used to be ancient Nineveh, to proclaim ISIS. So they use dates very significantly. But we'll come back and talk about the significance of 9/11. And continue taking some phone calls right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Are you ready to boycott Oreo cookies?
Columnists like Marilyn Katz and presidential candidates like Donald Trump said they're ready to stop eating Oreos because Nabisco's parent company shut down its Chicago plant and decided to lay off 600 workers. Oreos are an all-American sandwich cookie that was invented by the National Biscuit Company in 1912. We all enjoy the indulgence of dunking them in cold milk, but shipping 600 jobs to Mexico was enough for some people, and they plan to boycott Oreos. While people want to blame Nabisco's parent company for the move, they should look at government policies. A major ingredient in Oreos is sugar, but the U.S. sugar program creates this job-killing action. Americans pay twice the average world price for sugar. Thus, industries that use sugar have a big incentive to relocate from the United States to other countries. Oreos are also manufactured in a number of other states like New Jersey, Oregon, and Virginia. But how long will it be before some of those cookie factories move due to the protectionist trade practices? Oreos are not just an American cookie, but Oreos are a global brand that probably should be produced in other countries. There is, of course, another reason. Oreos in Mexico are now produced by the biggest cookie factory in the world. Frankly, it was cheaper to move jobs to that plant than to refurbish a plant in Chicago and pay unionized workers. And let's not forget that the United States has the highest corporate income tax in the world. You know, we may lament the loss of jobs from America to other countries, but we don't have to look any further than government taxes, regulations, and policies that are to blame. That's how the cookie crumbles. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Giving Films, 90 Minutes in Heaven, based on a true story, in theaters now, rated PG-13. More information at 90minutesinheaventhemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Kassie Dulin, Jonathan Bodnar, Matt Krause, and we'll take some more phone calls in just a minute. But Jim, who was a first-time caller, by the way, it's always good to get our first-time callers. And I might, again, just welcome our new station there in Holland, Michigan this week. So we picked up another radio station. But those of you that are just listening in, I hope you'll listen for a while, because you'll find that we try to have a roundtable on our Friday weekend edition, but then we bring in all sorts of other guests. But Jim has obviously studied this fairly well, and in my book, A Biblical Point of View on Islam, I did point out the significance of 9/11. That is, since it is September 11th today, why did Osama bin Laden pick that? Well, in September 11th, 1683, the Muslim army, in this case was the Ottoman Empire, was destroyed and defeated at the Battle of Vienna. It was a horrible loss. There have been two times when Muslims have moved into Europe. The first time was after the death of Muhammad. Some of the Muslim army moved to the east, and they went into Persia, which would be present-day Syria and Iraq and Iran. But most of the Muslim army headed towards the African continent, and they took over all of northern Africa, took over Spain, which later became known as Moorish Spain, but then they eventually were defeated at the hands of Charles Martel in France. But the most significant defeat was an attempt later on when the Ottoman Empire tried to once again, and the Muslims tried to once again take Europe, and they were defeated at the very gates of Vienna on September 11th. And so that's why Osama bin Laden picked September 11th. So a little factoid there that might be of interest to you. But let's take a few more phone calls real quickly. We have also been talking about Kim Davis. So I think Dorinda in Ohio, WLRY, would like to join us and talk about that. So go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I, too, am a first-time caller, and I've been listening to your station for some time now, and I really enjoy it. My idea for the clerks nationwide would be that they could come up with some sort of a county seal that would go on marriage licenses, all marriage licenses, where no one would have to sign them necessarily, but it would be a seal from that county, because normally when somebody wants to prove that they have gotten married and they need to get a copy of their marriage license, no one really cares who signed that marriage license, maybe just what county it came from and what state it came from.
That's a good idea. Let me come to you, Matt, for just a minute, because one of the things that you have done in the Texas legislature, and again, you are a Texas state representative, is you recognize that if this is coming down, it could affect people, and you have like a pastor protection bill that you've passed. And you've tried to, in your legislative actions, do some things to protect pastors and clerks and other individuals. You know, the Attorney General's tried to do that as well. What would you recommend to other listeners that maybe are representatives or have the ear of their local representative? What could they do in their state?
Right. I think anytime you can chip away by accommodations or protecting religious liberty, that's what you should do. As you said, in Texas this past session, we exempted pastors and clergies from having to burden their religious conscience in any way by marrying people or taking part in a ceremony that violated their conscience. We worked with Kassie and Liberty Institute and some other legislators on some other areas, adoption home, foster care centers. We would have liked to have seen that bill passed that we couldn't. But if you find certain individuals or certain groups that you want to make sure they can continue to exercise their religious liberty, go to your legislators, sponsor a bill that exempts them and gives them that freedom of conscience so that they can do what they need to continue to do.
Kassie, I guess you would have some places where people can go on Liberty Institute where they can do an audit and figure out where maybe their Christian organization or their church has legal exposure. Is that true?
We do. You can go to libertyinstitute.org/audit, and you can find all of our resources that we've prepared for churches and nonprofits and faith-based schools, where you can get your legal documents in order. So just in case anyone ever tries to take legal action against you because of your beliefs, if your documents are in order, it's much easier for you to have strong legal protection. But one thing I think that it's interesting to note is Jorinda was talking about the idea of just doing a seal. Hawaii has actually moved to a system where they issue their licenses online. So there's no need for an individual to give approval of it. And I think that's a very common sense measure that could be implemented, because part of the question is, what does it hurt to accommodate someone's religious beliefs? It really doesn't, especially if there's very low cost to the state, and it makes things more efficient. So I think that's just one of many examples of a common sense way to protect people's conscience.
Yeah. On the one hand, you want to have a situation where individuals should understand the requirements of the job. Mm-hmm. And as I've said before, if you're a vegan and you say, I don't want to touch meat, well, you better not apply to be a meat inspector. Okay. That just makes sense. You know, we have a case right now where a Muslim woman is saying, well, I'm a flight attendant, but I can't serve alcohol. Sorry, that's part of the job, you know, and if you don't want that, fine, you know, and if you don't want to serve pork, I understand that, but, you know, don't apply for that job, you know. But this is a different situation where in a couple of cases you've had individuals that thought they knew what the job entailed, and then 5 justices using judicial tyranny, can I add that political addition a little bit, actually changed the requirements of that job. And so that's kind of a different issue. You know, one of the other things we've talked about this week are the flood of refugees and even the Christian refugees. So let me go to Chris in California, KYCC. Put another issue on the table. Not that we are lacking for issues, but we'll take one more issue. Chris, what would you like to talk about today?
Hi, Kerby. How you doing today?
Very good.
I spent last week probably maybe 3 or 4 hours trying to find out from different organizations where the refugees are, if it's possible to house one of the Christian refugees. All of them were, had their hand out and wanted money, but none of them where they were going. But then I read an article that said that, they're going to bring in 9,000 Syrian Muslims.
Yes, I know.
And I'm wondering,
why isn't
the church stepping up to the plate and being like, hey, we need to figure out a way to get these people here? And, I mean, we did it, during Vietnam. I mean, my parents had refugees before I could remember. I think I was like 2 years old, from Laos. But then you had the Christians over there getting slaughtered and, give us money and we'll feed them. It's like, why not get them out of there? I mean, we got the borders open and we got illegals coming that way. I don't understand. I wonder if you guys had any thought on that.
I probably will bring Jonathan back on the program here, because one of the things that he has talked about before, wrote the book, of course, on Defying ISIS, is that Johnny Moore has really spent some time talking about what they are doing through the Cradle Fund. And as you may have known, we have always been trying to do something to support those refugees there. And many of the ones that we're talking about are those that have left Iraq, but their hope is that they would be able to go back. And so it's one thing to remove an individual and to bring them over to this country, which might be the next stop, So I want to talk to Johnny Moore about that a little bit more. But as you well know, we actually felt that there was something we should do here at Point of View. So we've raised a fair amount of money, and any dollar that you give to the Cradle Fund, which is on our website, 100% of it goes over there. And when Johnny Moore was on a while back, we actually had, I think, $35,000 that we already sent. Then when I saw him at Prestonwood Baptist Church the other day, he said, I thank you for that. I said, well, I hate to tell you. Actually, I think I should tell you that we raised more. So it's over $50,000 now. So we sent another check. But we need to find out what is the next step. The goal originally for those refugee camps was the hope that eventually ISIS would be driven back and Christians would go back into Iraq. Because let's think about this for a minute. This is the first time since the efforts in this area of northern Iraq. Since that time, we've always had some Christian communities there. I mentioned Mosul earlier. That's where Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi actually, was sworn in as the chief caliphate. Well, what's the original name of Mosul? Nineveh. Then think about that,
Wow.
Matter of fact, ISIS went and destroyed what is reputed to be the tomb of Jonah. So these are Christians that would like to go back to Iraq. So it makes sense to feed them. But your question is a good one, Chris. If we don't see any willingness on the part of this president or any ability on the part of any of the actors there in the Middle East, why don't we bring them over here? The other concern we had yesterday, of course, with Colonel McGinnis is they've already begun to discover in some of those Syrian refugees individuals who are obviously ISIS operatives. No surprise there. So we're going to bring in 10,000 refugees from ISIS. Let's hope we check them out. What do you think?
Yeah, that's right.
Just one more issue on the table. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to change topics a little bit, and that is we have a presidential debate coming up on Wednesday. All sorts of comments being made about Donald Trump, and I thought I'd give you a chance to hear what Bobby Jindal had to say at the National Press Club. Got a feeling he's not going to be getting a Christmas invitation from Donald Trump, but nevertheless, it'll start our conversation about all the various individuals who are running, 17 different individuals. What do we think about some of the front runners, and what do we think about this next debate coming up on Wednesday? So we'll do that, and of course, you can join our conversation as well. 1-800-351-1212. Some of the articles we've posted relate to the nuclear arms deal as well as Kim Davis, and one article on Donald Trump and Ben Carson. Something else we'll talk about. We'll do that right after these important messages.
Please remember September, the month that your gift to Point of View will be doubled. Give $25, it becomes $50. Give $50, it becomes $100. One of the ministry's very special friends wants to motivate you to give, especially if you've never given before. No gift is too little nor too big. Please give generously. Help us equip believers to represent Jesus Christ in this very important and critical hour. Call now and give 1-800-347-5151 or online at pointofview.net. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net.
From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room. Tony and Elizabeth Jordan's marriage is turning into a battle, and their daughter is caught in the crossfire until Elizabeth meets Miss Clara.
This is my favorite place in this house. I call it my war room.
And learns that prayer is a powerful weapon. War Room. Now play. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at warroomthemovie.com.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Kassie Dulin with us, as well as Jonathan Bodnar and Matt Krause. Now, next Wednesday, September 16th, at the Reagan Library, CNN will host a debate. They have now listed their candidates, and it's kind of interesting because they actually put in 11, because in case of Chris Christie and John Kasich, they're kind of tied. So basically you have Donald Trump and Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Huckabee, Rand Paul, John Kasich, Chris Christie, and Carly Fiorina. So really what they did was just add one more to the previous. But then they also had some others that did not make the cut, and those are Rick Perry, Rick Santorum, Bobby Jindal, George Pataki, Lindsey Graham, and interestingly enough, Gilmore is out now. So I guess that's no surprise. So that's kind of the lineup, and there are going to be a number of statements being made about various candidates. It's kind of a little more testy between Donald Trump and Ben Carson, so we have that article. It's going to get real testy between him and Bobby Jindal, and Bobby Jindal was actually in front of the National Press Club and made these comments about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is for Donald Trump. He believes in nothing other than himself. Look, he's not a liberal. He's not a moderate. He's not a conservative. He's not a Democrat. He's not a Republican. He's not an independent. Donald Trump is for Donald Trump. He's not for anything. He's not against anything. Issues don't mean anything to him. Policies, ideals are not important to him. He is for Donald. Donald Trump is a narcissist and he's an egomaniac.
Well, that gives you a little bit of a sense of where that conversation went. And if you've watched his campaign ads, and I've seen them online, it's kind of like, okay, we've had the summer of fun, but let's now get serious. And so whether that works for Bobby Jindal or not remains to be seen. But that is, I think, what we're going to see a little bit more of. So let me go around the round table. Matt, sometimes in a campaign you have to talk about your opponent, but I think there's a bigger opponent than anybody sitting on that Republican stage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I love the fact that Donald Trump has been so big on the stage that for somebody who's not getting any traction like Bobby Jindal, the only way for him to do that is to attack Donald Trump, because then he knows that will actually get some coverage. So, yeah, you're exactly right. In my campaigns, when we try to tell people, is you stick to the record, you don't do personality. But with Donald, there is no record. So I guess that's all you have to go on at this point.
That's what I was wondering. Cassie, any thoughts about this? And I'll go around the round table for everybody here. Just any thoughts about candidates that seem to be on the rise, others that we need to pay attention to, where we are on this?
Sure. Well, recent polling is showing that Donald Trump is just on an upward trajectory, that it's almost a straight line up. If you look at his polling, even from the beginning of July until now, he has just gained so much traction. But at the same time, so has Ben Carson. And it's interesting to me because those two have so little in common. If you look at their style, Donald Trump is about as bombastic as it gets, and Ben Carson is about as gentle as it gets. But what they have in common is they're both outsiders. They've never held political office and really haven't run for political office before. And I think that's actually appealing. And when you listen to them, you both get the idea that they're authentic. And I think that that's something that the American people are really craving right now, especially with some of the scandals we've seen going on, even on the Democratic side. I think, especially millennials, they're craving that authenticity that they think both Carson and Trump bring to the table.
They are outsiders, though, and if you add Carly Fiorina, there's three individuals that have never served. Then if you add Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, none of them have ever been governors. So you can really go down and say that there is such an anti-establishment, because, again, you could say Ted Cruz is kind of a rookie, and, he's not the problem. He's been standing up against it. There's something going on there, isn't there? So that's something thought. Jonathan, real quickly, I want to get your comments on maybe some of the candidates. Anybody that you'd like to talk about in a positive or negative way? You got the floor.
Yeah, definitely. I think what Kassie said is she hit the nail on the head there. I think what Trump represents to like a millennial generation is a simplified political perspective. I think he's not really a politician, so he doesn't talk in riddles so much. And he's bold. I think his passion drives support. And I mean, if you look back in 2008, that's more or less how Obama won. He simplified and was just very, very passionate. I think what it comes down to, if you contrast the candidates, is really occupation. Like you said, none of them have really served. None of the headrunners have really served. And so between Obama and Carson, it's the difference between somebody that's ran a business or somebody that's a brain surgeon, and which one's going to be better for a presidential office.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And it's interesting because you were talking about he doesn't speak in riddles. And I think that that's something people appreciate about Trump. They say that one of the best levels to speak at for a public audience is like a 5th to 8th grade level. And Trump sometimes takes it down to about 1st grade. So I think people appreciate that.
Well, okay, what about the argument that he sometimes acts like an 8th grader? He talks about Carly Fiorina's face, or he referred to Ben Carson as not having any enthusiasm that compared to Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush looks like the Energizer Bunny. So, I mean, it's just there's a line every day, isn't there?
Right. Well, and I think sometimes your greatest strength can be your greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And I think in the end, this phenomenon with Trump, I think will fizzle out at some point. I think there will be too many of he's only a war hero because he got caught. Look at her face. Some of those things that would normally sink any other candidate, with one of those, I think they're going to build up. And I think I would guess by late fall, early winter, that Trump bump will be gone, and we'll be looking at just a very smaller circle of contestants.
8 years ago at this time, the lead was actually held by Rudy Giuliani.
That's right.
And second was Fred Thompson. So that's something to mention. But it's okay, let's just play that out for just a minute. The Trump phenomenon fades away. Who inherits any of that? Any thoughts?
I think the natural landing spot for them right now is Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
And I think Ted Cruz is doing a pretty brilliant asked to be there. Donald Trump. When everybody else is attacking Donald Trump, who stays close with him? Ted Cruz. So I can see that as a natural landing spot for those disaffected by the establishment in Washington. They can land with somebody who's fought the establishment in Washington the entire time.
Well, I think another person that may receive a bump, I totally agree about Cruz. I think people are looking for a fighter right now, but they're attracted to authenticity. They're attracted to a fighter, but they're also attracted to people they're just attracted to because they think they're likable. And I think that is where Carson really steps into the picture. He's polling even higher in Iowa than he is on the national level right now. And if you look at his favorability, unfavorability polling, his favorability rate right now is 67%, which is pretty good. His unfavorable rating is only 6%. And then the rest is made up by people who just aren't familiar enough. Whereas Trump has a 59-29 split. So I think he may
He's
start...
improved over time.
And he's improved.
Yeah, because he had the highest negatives. Marco Rubio has a high favorability, too.
Yeah.
Is he got, if we end up with 5, are we down to those 5? The problem for Ben Carson, and, is a man I just have such respect for. I've shared a platform with him, met his wife, Candy. Matter of fact, we put an article up yesterday about his wife, Candy Carlson, and everything else. He doesn't have as much money. He started getting some momentum and started getting some money, but money is important, and it seems to me that right now the person other than Jeb Bush in the Republican side that has the most amount of money is Ted Cruz. So he can be around, he can respond to attack ads and do a lot of things that a Ben Carson might not be able to do after Iowa. Right?
That's right. Well, and I wouldn't discount, I think you just said his name, Marco Rubio. I wouldn't discount him either. He's very authentic, has a lot of authenticity to him, very genuine, great communicator. So I think there's room for a guy like that to make a run too.
Well, again, we'd love to get some of your comments, so let's take those along the way. We'll go to Arizona this time and see what Jeff would like to add to the conversation. You have the floor.
Okay. One comment about Ben Carson. I like Ben Carson, but he is in a Christian cult, which is Seventh-day Adventist. So why he's criticizing Trump for his Christian faith, which we don't know what it is, but I don't know, he's not an evangelical, which is fine. It's just not his brand of Christianity. But if Ben Carson is a Seventh-day Adventist, that's a Christian cult.
First of all, I'd be careful about that because, he was baptized as in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'd like to know a little bit more about his faith before I want to throw that term around real quickly. But it's a good question that you raised, and that is, I'm not sure that the best thing that Ben Carson could have said is to say, well, I just really have questions about Donald Trump's faith. I think everybody around the table does, but do you want to bring that up? I don't think that's exactly a winning strategy. But as we get to know Ben Carson more, if he says, no, I agree with all the tenets of Seventh-day Adventists, okay, maybe that would be an issue. I don't think it's as much of an issue as, Mormonism was for some of the things that we've had in the past with Mitt Romney and others, but still, it will be interesting to see. The big problem is we have millions of individuals who are identified as born-again evangelical Christians who, first of all, are not registered to vote. Mm-hmm. Then of those who are registered to vote, a good number of them don't vote. And then you have, even of those who normally vote, some say, I'm not going to vote for somebody with whom I have theological disagreement. By the way, if you think you have theological disagreement with Ben Carson, you really have some theological disagreement, I think, with Donald Trump. But just a thought on that. Let's take a break. We'll take some more phone calls right after this.
A new chapter in the battle between the state and religious liberty has begun. Ground Zero became a Rowan County, Kentucky jail. County Clerk Kim Davis is not in any way seeking to stop same-sex marriages in her county. She simply doesn't want to issue those licenses. To do so would make her a participant in that which her faith teaches violates God's law. She's fine with recording any legal marriage license. She just doesn't want her name affixed to it. Marriage licenses are permanent records and remain in county records permanently. The judge could have ordered the state of Kentucky to change the licenses. Instead, he ordered Kim to jail. Michael Keegan of the far-left People for the American Way made this reasonable-sounding statement. Elected officials who feel they can't in good conscience fulfill their duties have an honorable way to proceed. They can find another line of work. We're hearing this sentiment from some presidential candidates. Carly Fiorina would protect your right of conscience, but not if you work for the government. She said in an interview, I think when you're a government employee, you're put in a different position, honestly. Some would say to Kim, resign. Will we ask that of every person across the nation who inconveniences a gay couple by refusing to participate in what they sincerely believe is sin? If you're faithful to natural and biblical law, are you now excluded from working for the government? Same-sex marriage is being used as a weapon against religious liberty. Kim Davis is refusing to acquiesce. She tried another way before the Supreme Court handed down its decision. Clerks who wrote to the Kentucky legislature, then in session, asking lawmakers to, quote, get a bill on the floor to help protect clerks with religious objections to authorizing marriage licenses for same-sex couples. The Heritage Foundation suggests ways the state of Kentucky could handle this. Change the form, not the beliefs. Modify Kentucky marriage licenses so the county clerk's name does not necessarily appear, instead using the name of the deputy clerk who processes the license. Allow an opt-out, North Carolina does. Clerks who object can decline to be involved in issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples, while the state guarantees it will find someone else to perform the function. Or implement an online registration system for marriages. Hawaii has such a system. The White House insists no public official is above the rule of law. There's a double standard here. Attorney General Eric Holder refused to abide by, uphold, enforce, or defend the nation's law defining marriage as it has been for millennia. And when certain mayors, the most prominent being San Francisco's Gavin Newsom, defied state law and issued marriage licenses to same-sex couples, no one discussed imprisoning them. At this crucial moment, we need lots of Kim Davises. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kassie Dulin and Jonathan Bodnar and Matt Krause with us today. Let's go to another phone call in Texas. Ryan, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Kerby, how's it going?
Very good.
Hey, I'm actually a DTS student, so I thank you for coming out this morning to chapel. It was very enjoyable.
So you heard me once and you decided to hear me again. Boy, you really are a glutton for punishment.
I know. You got me addicted. No.
Okay, what's on your mind?
Okay, so I got a question for you. We're discussing all of this this turmoil within the world right now, right? You're talking about ISIS. We're talking about how the U.S. has begun to put people in prison for their faith. And there's just a ton of things that are going on. It seems as it's snowballing. and getting worse. As a Christian, knowing that Christ is returning, and as we read in the Word, it does just get worse until that day does come. And so what do we do with that as far as our political action that we take, or with action that we take against ISIS? How does that influence the actions that we are called to take?
Very good question. First of all, we certainly should recognize that the time is short, and that's why I think preaching the gospel is so very important, and certainly use these opportunities to share your faith with anyone, and if God has called you into ministry or the mission field, do so. But I also believe, and Matt, you can speak to this as well, I think Christians should be good citizens, and I believe that not only does Romans 13 tell us that we should obey those in authority, and 1 Timothy 2 tells us that we should pray for those in authority, I believe that you could make a very good case that we should vote for those in authority. I think that someday we'll stand before God and he'll ask, how have you used the gifts I've put in your hand? And one of those gifts that we enjoy in America is the gift of the vote. And I'm sad to see that millions and millions of born-again, self-identified evangelical Christians are not registered to vote and are not voting. And we recognize that voting in the next person is not going to usher in the kingdom. But at the same time, I think we are to be salt and light until the Lord returns. And I got some people that get so preoccupied with the Lord returning, they're not occupying until he comes.
Right. Well, we know Scripture says that no man knows the hour of the Lord's return. So it could be in a couple months. It could be in a couple of decades. So why not be invested in what's going on right now, since we don't know? Secondly, I think you hit the nail on the head, salt and light. Church is good about being light, but we're not so good about being salt. Salt flavors and it preserves. And if we are, as Christians, aren't out in the public square flavoring the culture and preserving the culture, things will get much worse much quicker. And finally, I know John Quincy Adams, they talked to him about ending slavery, and he tried and tried and tried, and he kept failing. They said, don't you get discouraged? He said, you know what? Duty is ours, results are God's.
Yes.
And so it's not up to us to understand when God's coming back and to let things go bad. Our job is to make an impact in the culture and society we're in. Let God take care of the results. We just have to be faithful with what he's called us to do.
You think of Martin Luther saying, if I know the Lord was going to return tomorrow, I'd still plant a tree today and pay my debts, because we don't know. And I think that's important. Kassie, one of the questions I think a lot of people are going to have is, well, okay, how do I go about this? And one of the things you have on Liberty Institute is what churches can do. And it seems to me that right now, between now and the first election, that people can participate. We have primaries coming up in just 5 months. And we will, by this time next year, already have nominees in both parties. But it seems to me that churches do have the freedom to allow people to register to vote within that. They could actually invite candidates. And you have a very good kind of one-page summary there at Liberty Institute that talks about all the legal freedoms that we have, all the constitutional freedoms we have to actually educate people about these issues.
We do, that's correct. And Liberty Institute also advised on a website called voteundergod.com that has all the resources that a church might need to register their members to vote, because as Christians, we are called to occupy. And Exodus 18:21 says we should select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. And so that's one of our responsibilities as a Christian, and one of the church's roles is to help people fulfill that duty. So churches are completely legally covered. The IRS is very, very clear that churches can run voter registration drives. All the candidates in a race to speak, and they can speak directly about specific issues and legislation. So if you go to voteundergod.com and go under for churches, legal information, we have all that legal information provided by Liberty Institute.
Jonathan, one of the things I have noticed is the younger you are, the less likely you are to be registered to vote. And so as a ministry that you've been involved with, as the co-founder, Unashamed Impact, what would you say to your fellow millennial generation? We've talked about a lot of issues today, and if they go, I guess I'm not going to be registered to vote, I don't know what I can do, because if this does not light your fire, your wood is wet.
That's very true, Kerby. I kind of see it like this. Our job isn't just, as Christians, our job isn't just to bring people into the kingdom of heaven. Our job is to bring the kingdom of heaven here on earth. And it's kind of like what he said earlier. Duty is ours, results are God's. And Matthew 16:19 says it like this: whatever you bind in heaven will be bound on earth. And I think the very power that's God's given us as humans demands us to use it to create an environment conducive for our faith. And that includes, interacting in politics and taking an active part in that.
Let's take at least one more phone call here. We'll go out to Arizona, WAGP. Renee, what would you like to add to the conversation today?
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to say, first of all, like you were saying before, as Christians, as a conservative, I believe that it's our duty to educate ourselves on these candidates. I wanted to make a comment about Ben and also Ted Cruz. As far as Ben Carson, I have a question. Like, how do you think he would be debating someone like Hillary Clinton? And then also, I know that he also did research with embryonic stem cells, and so I don't know. I think that's something that we need to look at. And as far as as far as with what we believe and everything, he has been right on track with every conservative value that there is. And I think that people need to look at that and then, decide.
Well, I think you got a good point. And we've talked about this before. Every candidate usually has some negative, but it's hard to find one for Ted Cruz. When you talk about Marco Rubio, okay, it's immigration. With it's Jeb Bush, okay, well, it's a long list, but we'll just leave it at Common Core and et cetera. And you go down each one of them, there are some issues. And so that's something to think about. And whether he becomes the nominee or not, he is in perhaps the best position to inherit what Donald Trump has. So
that's right.
Wouldn't you agree? You got a chance to hear him last night.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he is in a great position. I've known him for about 7 years now, and he's never wavered from the time I knew him before he ran for office till now he's running for the nation's highest office. And when you see that kind of consistency in somebody, it gives you a lot of confidence that they can withstand the trials that are coming their way.
And I like his wife, too. That was a problem with Scott Walker because his wife is not pro-life. Mm-hmm. And so Scott Walker kind of dropped in a lot of people's minds because, oh, dear, we've been through this before where
as fantastic as the senator is, and they would make a great first couple, I believe.
I would say that about Rick Perry and his wife, too, but
Absolutely.
I don't think he's going to make it, so that's another one to deal with. Well, guys around the table, I appreciate you being involved with us today. And let me just mention, next week we have Max Lucado in studio on Wednesday, so if you want to swing by and meet him, he will be here. Also have Jerry Tuma in studio. We have Robert Spencer. We're going to be talking about ISIS and talking about Islam. Gary Chapman will be talking about marriage, and we have lots to cover. So all of it will be taking place next week, and you can visit our website, pointofview.net. If you'd like to know more about any one of our guests, we have links to all of their websites. We also have a couple of the articles that I've mentioned there as well on the nuclear Iran deal, as well as Kim Davis, as well as some of the candidates. And so all of that's available on our website, pointofview.net. Don't forget that next year we're going to Israel and Greece. You can come either to Israel or Greece or both. And, of course, we also have our match fund. So lots to talk about. Don't forget that we really want you to join with us any way you possibly can. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris. Have a great weekend. See you back here on Monday.
From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room. Tony and Elizabeth Jordan's marriage is turning into a battle, and their daughter is caught in the crossfire until Elizabeth meets Miss Clara.
This is my favorite place in this house. I call it my war room.
And learns that prayer is a powerful weapon. War Room. Now playing. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. More information is available at warroomthemovie.com.
As you fight in your war room, please include Kerby and Point of View in your prayers. We have a very important opportunity right now. A wonderful friend has said that he will match every gift in September up to a total of $50,000. Point of View needs that support to keep equipping you for your life inside and outside your war room, both as you pray and as you live. So please call now and give generously. 1-800-347-5151 or online at pointofview.net. That's 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.